Okay, so we started by just doing an old-fashioned, here's a problem, y equals 2/3 x plus 7. And the kids all instantly knew that this was the slope and that this is the y-intercept. Then I asked them to write an equation for something that'd be parallel to that. And most people knew right away that this would be like, oh, if you just make the slope the same, then you could just change this, and now it's parallel to it. But then I said, but I want it to go through the point 2 comma 9. That means you can't just like put 2 comma 9 in this thing, but you actually could. Let me show you how you could have done it this way. Would you agree that y equals 2/3 x just all by itself would be an equation that is parallel to the first one? Would you agree with that? Okay. But if I wanted it to be in this form, then I could write y equals 2/3 x plus b, and then where would I put the point 2 comma 9? Come on, guys, it's not that hard. Where would you put 2 comma 9? Owen.
You would subtract 9 from y.
I think you're solving it or something. Tell me where to put the 2 and the 9. Yeah, x and y. You put 2 here, and you put 9 here. Have you ever thought about that? You probably haven't. What would it do if I did that? It would allow you to solve it for b. And then you'd know the equation was y equals 2/3 x plus whatever b comes out to be. You see what I mean? I don't think any of you guys ever knew that. You can do that. You can do that. But I think there's actually an easier way. I think the easier way is to know a different equation. Would somebody please tell me the other equation that is probably easier to use in this case? Owen.
y1 minus y2 equals x1 minus x2.
And I'm just changing it to this way because I'm more familiar with it this way. He used sub 2s and sub 1s, but do you get this would be essentially the same thing? Okay. Then you can stick the slope here. And the point, which I said 2 comma 9 was my point I wanted, the 2 would go here and the 9 would go there, and then you're done. And some people think that you have to solve for y, though. No, you don't. In calculus, they tell us that they use this more often than the other form because they like having a point and a slope in their equations, so they use point slope. You'll understand more about why they do that when you hit calculus. Okay. Now, one little tweak would I need to make if I wanted it to be perpendicular instead of parallel? Smirla.
Flip the slope.
So this turns into 3/2. You're right so far, but I need more.
A negative.
Yes. There we go. You just make it the opposite and then flip it. Okay. So what's new today? Let's talk about curves. Do you get that this thing's slope would totally depend on where you picked 2 points? Do you agree that I could pick 2 points that are on it? And if I pick these 2 points, the slope would be pretty steep and positive. But if I pick these 2 blue points, I could make it fairly steep and negative. So it depends. But what you probably didn't know is that if I pick these 2 points, I'm finding the average slope for that region of the graph. If you use the 2 endpoints like that, you're finding the average slope. That's what we call it anyways. All right, so on today's homework assignment, we're going to be giving you problems that look kind of strange, and you're going to be using endpoints like this. It will basically come down to finding 2 points. Once you find 2 points, getting the slope is easy. So again, let's say that in some obscure way, I get you to figure out that this is the point 12 comma 4, and this is the point 20 comma 8. And then, of course, from there, wouldn't it be easy to find the slope between those 2 points? Yeah, so the only challenge today is we give you these 2 points in unusual ways. And we also give you equations in the middle of word problems, and then you got to get a slope for a word problem. I did one yesterday about temperature and time, and I want to do another one today about electrifying the car parking lot out there. As you guys know, I'm kind of obsessed with Tesla and other electric cars. And right now, there's not many electric cars out there. I'm still waiting. I've got one on order. Someday I'll have an electric car, but it's going to take a while for them to actually build the Cybertruck. It's coming. But, out there will eventually be a car in that parking lot. I think already I saw one. Some teacher is driving one, but it's just not in that particular lot. Okay, so that lot holds a fair amount of cars. Eventually there'll be a car. Do you think it's going to go like this? There's 1 car this year, 2 cars next year, 3 cars the next year, 4 cars the next year. Nah, it probably won't go like that. It'll be more lumpy than that. But maybe there'll be 1 car next year, and then 3 cars the next year, and then like 5 cars, and then like 12 cars. It'll just kind of go not super smooth and exact. So that means linear versus non-linear. If it was just 1 car each year, that's linear. But if it's 1 car, 2 cars, 4 cars, 8 cars, 16 cars, if it goes like that, then that would be exponential. And that's going to be a curve. And then the slope could be found by finding any 2 points in there. Okay, so let's say that it's in year 1, which we'll call this year, that somebody like later this year buys a Tesla or some other electric car. And now all of a sudden we got 1, 1. In year 1, we have 1 electric car out there. In year 3, let's say we've got 5 electric cars out there. What can I do with that? Well, this is the year. This is the EVs. Would you please figure out the slope and then figure out what it means? In year 1, that means this year. Let's say that there's 1 EV out there. But let's say in year 3, there's 5 EVs. So just because it's got context doesn't mean it fundamentally changes. You're still finding the slope. 5 minus 1 over 3 minus 1. 5 minus 1 is 4. Over 3 minus 1 is 2, which equals 2. Okay, but does that really accurately represent what happened? No, it wasn't 2 cars every year. But that's the average. See what I mean? Still can have averages. Even if something's exponential, you can take a period of time and say, well, on average over this time, we had this much. Okay, so if I just said 2, it would be losing a lot of data. It was 2 EVs per 1 year. On average. It's an average rate of change. Okay. One of the reasons that I'm very confident that EVs are going to be like growing like this is that every car manufacturer out there is talking about their EVs, like every one of them. So a new company that doesn't even have EVs right now is Apple. But Apple has already hired 200 car engineers. What do you think they're doing? And Apple has admitted, yep, we're working on an electric car. So in just a few years, Apple will say, poof, we've decided to go electric. We got an electric car. Toyota just announced within the last 1 week that they finally have gone with an all-electric car. They're just going to be selling it starting like 2 years from now, but at least they're announced they've got one. So Toyota is one of the biggest car companies out there, and they've been kind of a holdout this whole time. Now they're jumping on board too. So anyway, this is an average. Now, how about if I give you a graph like y equals x squared and said, here's an obscure way to tell you where the 2 points are that I want you to pick, because you could pick many different points off of this. What if I said, I want you to find the average slope over the interval from 1 to 3. Let's process what that would mean. Did they just give me the point 1 comma 3? No, they did not. They said they wanted to know from 1 to 3, like this is where x is 1 and this is where x is 3. They wanted to know the average slope over that period of time. So don't I need 2 points? Like, don't I need a point here and here? Yes, I do. So how do I find those points? You make an XY chart, your best friend in graphing. Paige, did I get given the 1 and 3? Are those X or Y's? Those are X's. So 1 and 3 are my 2 X values. Okay? Kira, how do I use that 1 to get myself a point? Because if I have 2 points, it'll be easy to get the slope.
Plug it into the line and that's good.
So 1 goes here, and what do I get?
1,
And then what's the other one?
9.
And now I got 2 points. You guys see how I got that? All right. So then I just have to find the slope between those 2 points. Everybody find the slope between those 2 points. By now, I hope you're getting good at this, where you just go 9 minus 1 over 3 minus 1. So the y is subtracted over the x is subtracted, and I get 8 over 2, which is 4. Did it go up 4 each time? No. But on average, the slope over that interval would have been 4. That make sense? Okay. All right, so I think you've got that well enough. Now let's talk about some word problems. Oh, I want to talk about this for a minute too. A, B, and C are integers. I think I mentioned this yesterday. -2 to -1 to 0 to 1 to 2. Did I tell you before what integers were? Okay, then would you please write down the first 3 whole numbers? Because I also told you that. What are the first 3 whole numbers? Because that is not a list of the first 3 whole numbers. Those are integers. Did you say 0, 1, 2? Good, because that's what the whole numbers are. ... They just keep going. Whole numbers start with an O. Right in the middle of the word whole is a 0. It's a way to think of it. All right, and then who remembers the name for the ones that start with 1? Tadros?
Natural.
Correct. And are these just like trivia questions? No, because the ACT has it in their list of things they can ask you is numbers sets like this. Like what is a rational number? Those can be written as a fraction. What is a natural number? Well, they start with 1, 1, 2, 3, etc. What are whole numbers? Starts with 0. What are integers? Like this, they go forever in both directions. Okay, so these are got to be integers. And I misspoke yesterday. I actually thought that only A and B had to be integers, but it's actually all 3 of them. A, B, and C have to all be integers. So, that was my bad. So here's one. Tell me why this is not in standard form. Well, because A, B, and C aren't integers. Now, some kids will say, okay, so just change the 3/5 to a different number. No, I want you to use the same numbers here, but keep it the same ratios. So what can I do to everything? And don't say multiply by 5, because there's something smarter than that, that can clear the fractions. Because just like if you can factor it, you should. That's a really powerful statement, used a lot in here. If there's fractions, clear them is another powerful statement. Okay, Michael.
Multiply by 10.
Yes, but I'm going to choose 5 times 2. Because 5 times 2 is 10, but if you can factor it, you should, right? And watch how slick this is. Cancels, 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 cancels. 5 times 2 is 10, times 2 is 20. 20x plus 3 times 2 is 6y equals 5. And now it's in standard form. That make sense? Okay. So there's standard form, there's slope-intercept form, and then there's this point-slope form, which is the one the calculus teachers say you gotta get them used to that. It's gonna happen a lot. And this is where the point goes. Okay, good enough on that. Now let's talk real world. At least we're simplifying the real world down to an equation where there's a cost for making X units. They're calling them Portaboys, and then right here it says Game Boy, which is pretty bad. Anyway, so they were trying not to copyright infringe, but then they did anyways. But X has got to be greater than or equal to 0. Let's think through what that means. Why can't you have a negative? That's what that really means. You can't be negative. Why can't you have negative? How would you manufacture negative number of game systems? You can't. That's what that is. That's just acknowledging in the real world you can't have negative x's. All right. Find and interpret C of 10. That should be easy. You should be able to do it in your head. Everybody try that right now. L, what do you say?
$950.
Yep. 80 times 10 is 900 plus the 80 times 10 is 800 plus the 150 makes 950. But what is it? Interpret that. $950 is what? Is it like how much a Lamborghini costs in Botswana? No.
It's the cost to produce 10 Portaboys.
Yep. All right. How many Portaboys can be produced for 15,000? Where would I put the 15,000, everybody? Don't put it in X. Where do you put it? Just say it.
It's you put it where the C of X is.
Yep. That becomes the 15,000 and you could solve, right? Let's not even do it because that's pretty easy. We already talked about this is just saying you can't have negative numbers of game systems. And find and interpret this. Why is that even interesting? You made 0 systems because then you still get $150 of costs. Is that real world? Yeah, because if you're a factory that's making nothing, do you get that still costs you money? You've got a factory. Is it free to just let your factory sit there? No, you have to have security. You have to have lights that are turned on or heat. If you don't have heat, the pipes in there will freeze that have water, and then you'll have all kinds of messes. So it costs you money, even if you make none. All right. I have an insurance agency. I can tell you, for example, that if we have to keep insurance on ourselves. Ironically, insurance agencies have to have insurance. Because why? Because if we screw up, then we can get sued by somebody, and that could cost us a lot of money. So we have insurance so that if we're protected in case we make a mistake. Do you get if we have a bad year and we don't sell as many policies, we still got to have insurance? It's called a fixed cost. So in theory, if I had a really, really bad year and I had no income, I'd still have to buy the insurance unless I want to completely go out of business. Okay, so there are some fixed costs in the real world. All right. And the last thought is the slope, of course. Kind of a slope theme. What's the slope of that graph? Well, it's really easy. It's 80. That's the slope. But what is it? 80 degrees per minute? No, it makes no sense. $80 per game system made. So that's like on Apple. Do you get if they only sell one phone, they still have a lot of expenses? They got to make. They have to have stores. They have to have employees. They have to have all the stuff, all the research and development. And so obviously they don't want to just sell one. But they have fixed costs. But then each extra phone does cost them more money, doesn't it? Oh my gosh, the irony. I paused the video here, but, and so the rate of change in this case was $80 per game system made. If you're talking about Apple products, they have a pretty high profit margin, but that means that when they sell you a phone for like $800, maybe they only spent $400 to build the phone, and they sell it to you for $800, and that makes them a profit. All right, moving. I don't want to keep doing word problems on this. The only difference here is they would make you write the equation and make you write the domain. Hint, the domain often is just as simple as bigger than or equal to 0, because you can't have negative products made, but you can make 0 products. And then sometimes your boss says, no, we got to sell at least 10. Otherwise, we're going to be like, there's people going to be angry with us if we don't sell at least 10 of these. Even when you're like manufacturing Lamborghinis or something really expensive, you got to sell some of them. Okay. I want you to process why this is just slope. It'll take you a minute to look at this. I'm not talking about this right now. I'm talking about this. Why is that just slope? Owen, what do you see about it that makes it just slope?
It kind of averages out.
Yes, it's an average slope. But how do you know it's slope and not like, I don't know, finding the y-intercept or something? How do you know this is just slope?
Oh, because it's changing y.
I like it. These are the y's. And we subtracted the y's. See, there's the y's. Over the x's being subtracted. Very good. Okay, so let's actually find the average slope for this equation. Do you need to be able to graph it? Nope, you don't. Do you need an XY chart? Yep, you do. And what is my x value that I'm going to start with? Come on, help out, it'll go faster. What's the first x value? All right, maybe this isn't clear. This is not a point. This is an interval. An interval over which we're going to evaluate this function. So 1 and 2 are the x values. How many of you knew that? All right. If you didn't know that now. This is an interval. I'm going to actually draw this for you so you can see kind of what we're talking about. Let's say that this function looks something like this. It's an x to the 4th, so I know it goes up on each end. I know it's up 2 because it's been moved up 2. And I'll try to make it look a little different than x squared, even though x to the 4th does look a lot like x squared. Anyway, there we go. And I'm going to find the average slope between 1 and 2. That means here's my spot when x is 1, and here's my spot when x is 2. I'm just taking 2 points, where this is 1, and this is 2. And then I got to figure out actual points for that. That's what this is for. Cal, what do I do with the 1 to get the answer for this?
You stick it into the equation.
Good. And then what did you get?
I got 5.
You are correct. 1 comma 5 is my first point. That spot there would be like 1 comma 5. Okay. Neil, how do I get the second point?
Plug it in.
And what'd you get? Maybe you haven't done it yet. 2 to the 4th is 16. 16 times 3. 48 plus 2. 50. There it is. 2 comma 50. Looks like my graph was much steeper. It is. X to the 4th is crazy steep. So this will be way up there. Okay. So now I got 2 points. From there, it's just finding slope. So 50 minus 5 over 2 minus 1. 25 over 1. So the slope is 25. Since I don't have any context, it's not a word problem. I can't say it's like, oh, 25 Teslas per hour or whatever. Yes? 45. Thank you. Yep. I don't know why. I thought just my head said that I was subtracting something else. Okay, let's move on. On this, they're just asking, what would a parallel slope be to that? 2/3. What would a perpendicular slope to that be? -3/2. We talked about that at the beginning of the hour, so these are pretty easy. Let's move on. Ooh, homework questions. This is where you're actually starting your homework. So yay, we've made it through the lesson. Let's make sure that you got this. My advice, this is not the graph of x to the third. X to the third would look like this. They're just made a funny looking guy, a penguin on a surfboard. Yeah. Anyway, but what we want is to find 2 points. These are the x values. So -1 and 2 go here. And once I find my 2 points, then I can find my slope really easily. It's the average rate of change. Smirlo, what'd you get when you put in -1?
When I put in -1,
And you got -1, you're correct. -1 to the third is -1. Okay, how about the 2? Hannah, you got that one?
it would be 8.
Yep. So that I got 2 points. -1, -1, and 2, 8. What do I do with the 2 points, Braden?
Find the slope.
So what minus what over what minus what?
Y minus y1.
Just how about the actual numbers in this case?
Oh, well, 8 minus -1
Over.
over 2 minus -1.
Perfect. 8 minus -1 is 8 plus 1, which is 9. Over 2 plus 1 is 3. And that's 9 divided by 3 is 3. That was the average rate of change over this interval from -1 to 2. That'd be like from here to, actually this graph would be more like that. And there's my slope of 3, and it makes total sense. This picture was not steep enough. I'll make my x to the third steeper like it really should be. That makes sense to you? All right. This next one, XY chart. If you understood that, you'll be able to tell me the 2 points. Once you get the 2 points, it's easy to find the slope. Patrick, what's the first x value I should use?
1.
Yep. And when you put in the 1, what do you get? Yep. Because it's 1 over 1, you get 1. And then the other one, Patrick.
5.
And what do you get when you put in 5? 1/5. Then, how do I find the slope? 1/5 minus 1 over 5 minus 1, which is 1/5 minus 1 is really -4/5. And 5 minus 1 is 4. Now, I had a kid do something last hour that I want to show you because I was kind of proud of him. He decided to clear the fraction. Now, some of you would times by 4. You can't do that. You can't just times by 4. If you times by 4 on the top and you don't times by 4 on the bottom, it's not going to stay balanced. So times by 4 does not work. But times by 5 does. Do you get if you times by the 5 on the top and the bottom, it kind of fixes my problem? Because this part will cancel. And I get -4 over 20, and that's the answer, just not simplified. Now, you could have done that by flipping and multiplying. That's how I would have done it, but I liked his way. Final answer, -1/5. And what was that again? It was the slope across this interval. All right. If I were you, I'd do a few more of those. I would definitely do a word problem like this. Remember, there's a lot of freedom for you to do what you want for your homework, but I at least do one of each kind of problem at a minimum. This is a pretty easy day, so maybe just make sure you get each kind. It could be any one of these. In fact, each of these kinds of problems could be on your test. So I'd try to be ready for that. This is one where they're giving you a point and an equation, and then they talk about being perpendicular to it. So it's like what we started the hour with, so these aren't that scary. These are always like stretchers, but this is not something that, I mean, we could absolutely put this on the test. It does give you a hint here to solve for y first. That is a challenge question. You don't have to do it. Those are always especially challenging. Not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that's not something I would torture myself with unless you had the time and the interest. All right. That's all I got for you about that. But before I finish up the video, I do want to mention that we turned in the lab yesterday, and I want to allow kids to do the an Insta retake of the lab if you choose. That's not normal. But for your first one, I get some of you were surprised by some of the things I was expecting. You know, like I get the first time you do something for a teacher, like the first time an English teacher grades an essay, you're like, oh, I didn't know she cared so much about spelling or whatever. So in my class, you might have not known, oh, I guess I have to label this. And oh, I didn't know you had to have, 3 different reflections. I thought 2. In fact, the directions actually said 2. So I was actually wrong on that 3 reflections thing because the directions kind of overruled me on that one. So here's 2 thoughts on that. Number 1, that format for all labs that I included in the most recent lab, it says format for all labs. That is the format for all the labs, okay? And I'm going to include that. In fact, I've stuck it in the lab folder now called format for all labs. So you now know that's my expectations. Number 2, I get that you wouldn't necessarily have known that. So I'm going to not make you redo the whole lab this time. You can just make changes to it to make it better. All right, so if you wish to do that, you can do that and turn that back in on top of the other submission. Same box, just goes right on top of the old one. And I got to hand your test back today too. Now that's all I've got for the video for today.